nearly everyone I speak with recognizes at some point that stress is a factor. Maybe they will do all this protocol stuff, work on their gut, change their diet, and do all this, and they've gotten kind of better, but they're plateauing. They're not getting all the way there until they're like, oh, I need to find a new job because the job I have is just way too stressful. I can't heal if I still have this job, or if I'm still in this relationship, or whatever sort of stressor is resolved. They find that then once they kind of remove that block from their lives, then they're able to more fully heal. So there's like the big things like that. And then there's just, the daily stress that we all need to, figure out how to manage. Personally, I have to work less than I did.
Welcome back to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. Today's episode is incredibly powerful, especially if you or someone you love has been told that this is chronic and you'll just have to manage this autoimmune condition. We're diving into the topic of autoimmune disease and what it truly means to rebuild your health from the inside out. Because what if your diagnosis wasn't the end of your story, but the beginning of a deeper healing journey? And today we're exploring how autoimmune conditions can improve and also reversed through food, lifestyle, nervous system regulation, and integrative root cause approaches, not just through symptom suppression. So if you've struggled through chronic inflammation, fatigue, hormone imbalances, or feeling like your body is attacking itself, then this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. I'm very excited to have Casey Hibbard with us today. She's the founder and head storyteller of Rebuilding My Health, which is an online platform showcasing natural and integrative health success stories to inspire hope and healing. After turning around autoimmunity and arthritis, she relentlessly sought and captured stories of others ending illnesses typically thought unfixable. She's the author of the newly released book, Overcoming Autoimmunity, Real Recoveries and What You Can Learn from Them. So welcome, Casey.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm so honored and excited to chat with you today.
Awesome. So tell us a bit about more of your journey. You said that you overcome your own sort of autoimmunity. What was the journey and your personal story around that, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So my health story started, I'll say in quotes, started after I had my first child, or after I had my son. Within probably about a year or so, I started having just a ton of symptoms. And for me, it looked like a lot of digestive stuff, fatigue that just seemed way more than being a new mom type of fatigue. What else? Arthritis was starting in my hands and my toes. I had pretty bad brain fog. And really, I think sort of the wake-up call or the scariest point was when I went to the eye doctor because vision in one eye was blurry. And the doctor said, it's inflammation. It's not an eye problem. It is a systemic full body problem. You need to look into this. Go see your primary care doctor. And I learned that I also had anti-nuclear antibodies going and positive. So there was some autoimmune activity. And then as I would test that, kind of check in every 6 months or so and test it, it was going up. So I was clearly on what I now call an autoimmune scale. And I was watching it go up and I was thinking, wow, I need to halt this. I need to do something. So in my case, I didn't get a specific label on the autoimmunity. They said based on my symptoms, maybe it was mixed connective tissue disorder or something
just
like that.
Markers, right? Just sort of blood markers and blood work.
Yeah, the markers. Yeah. So for me, it was like the check engine light was on and I needed to do something. So really, I started from a gut perspective, a place of gut health, because those were the loudest symptoms in many ways for me. That was kind of a daily thing that I was having digestive issues. And so I was like,
Right,
okay,
yeah.
well,
Had you had them for the years? Had it been years that you'd had these symptoms for?
yeah. And it's kind of interesting. It's like I say my health stuff started after I had a baby, but
Long
really,
before.
yes, I'd had for sure. If I'm honest with myself, yeah, I had digestive issues before that, and so gut health was really the portal into natural healing for me.
Mm.
And really, that looked like in the short term, changing my diet to eat the things that were not going to trigger symptoms. And that was a little bit of trial and error to figure that out. And then also some gut health testing over time. At first in conventional medicine, because I did start in the conventional framework. And then gradually, when I didn't feel like I was being fully helped, moved more into like get a gut health coach that took a more functional medicine or natural approach.
And so when was basically the moment you realized that your body was trying to communicate something deeper? Or had you just had the check engine light was on and you're just like, yeah, I'll be fine. Like these digestive issues, they'll just go away on their own. When did you really think that, oh, I really should get this checked out? Like the tiredness, I guess the eyes were starting to get blurry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have all these symptoms, right? And they're like, oh, I'll be fine. And then it could be months and years. And then we find something a little bit, worse than we thought initially because we let it go for too long, perhaps.
Right, for sure. I think it probably was sitting in the eye doctor's office with the blurry vision and the doctor saying this is a whole body problem that you need to get checked out. And just like I think probably kind of knew it was inflammation, but that was the point where someone said this is inflammation in your body. And back then I wasn't as well versed as I am now, but now, yeah, I fully understand. I was feeling so many symptoms of inflammation. When I look back at pictures of myself at that time, my face was kind of puffy.
Yeah.
My skin was red. My hands were puffy a lot of the time. And now I recognize those as symptoms of inflammation.
So what was the first thing that you did when you were diagnosed or, when the doctor said this was inflammation, this is some sort of autoimmunity? What was your next steps after that?
Yeah, I mean, I dove into the internet, I think, kind of, to kind of see, what I could do. And as I said, because my gut symptoms were the loudest, that is where I started. And so really an anti-inflammatory diet was step number one. And you
had a bad diet prior to that? Like, were you not eating well? What was your diet like before? And then what did you do to change?
Right. Yeah. I mean, my diet before was probably what most people would call kind of the standard American
diet.
We call it the standard American
diet. Yeah.
I don't know what it's called in the rest of the world, but
the fad diet. Yeah, we call it that too. The standard American diet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought I was eating well because I had fruits and vegetables, and I wasn't like a huge processed food eater. However, I was eating things that were very inflammatory for me, which like dairy and gluten turned out to be the two things that were super inflammatory for me. So just cutting out, and I did it slowly, really one thing at a time to see how
you reacted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So starting with dairy and noticing my symptoms got better. And then over time, someone suggesting you really should try cutting gluten out to see what happens. And that made a huge, huge difference for me. I later found out that I'm not celiac, but I do have a gene for gluten sensitivity. So really kind of dialing in on a diet that was going to help me reduce inflammation all the while as I worked on healing my gut were really the first two critical things that I did and really started to make a difference.
And it's so quick to notice difference. I mean, for yourself, as soon as you cut out the dairy and then cut out the gluten, how quickly did you notice? Like, we're just talking weeks even for some, right? When you've been suffering sometimes symptoms for years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me is a super fast feedback loop. So probably within like 2 or 3 days of not having any
Yeah,
dairy,
wow.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, my gut was much happier. And so then it's
Well,
kind
that's
of
such a
like,
big part of diet, right? So many people like have dairy, and I just did a genetic test and we're going through the results with a client of mine a couple of nights ago to realize that he was actually lactose intolerant. Look, he's not dairy, but obviously it comes with dairy. And he goes, "Oh, no wonder every time I have yogurt, I just don't feel right." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you're literally," and he's not even like, typical. A lot of Asian genes have it, but he was like Middle Eastern. And it's like, oh, that's not even like typical. But yeah, somewhere along the lines, right? Someone was lactose intolerant or passed on the gene. And yeah, if you don't know, then you just keep doing the things which could exacerbate a lot of the symptoms.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. So for me, it was just really noticing and it was refining it like, well, maybe I need a little bit of dairy. And, it turns out I really can't. So,
Yeah.
but like people would say, oh, maybe you can eat goat cheese or maybe you can eat hard cheese or maybe there's something. So like playing around with that over time and kind of, yeah, figuring out for myself. It was empowering actually to, after having years of issues, to feel like I had some measure of control over it and go, wow, from one meal to the next, I can control my symptoms and my
Yeah.
health.
And digestion is such a big part. Like even holistic medicine, as a Chinese medicine practitioner, seeing, hundreds of clients a week, it is so important because a lot of people, like I always ask them about first thing, how's your digestion? Are you getting bloating? Are you getting nausea? Are you getting, how are your bowel motions? Are you going to the toilet every day? Like what do the stools look like? These are all pictures and I think symptomology of what is really going on at the root cause of things, right? And so if we can find out, like I've had clients have told me they only go to the toilet once a week or every 4 days. And it's like, wow, that is not normal, right? It could be very common, right? They think, "Oh, I've been going like that my whole life." And I'm like, well, that's not, that is not what your body should be doing, right? There is what should be happening and then what you've got happening. And then it's like, let's look further. And then the first thing is diet, right? And so I guess for you and what you've seen with all the people you've interviewed, but what beliefs about healing has to change first before really taking the next steps? Because sometimes for people that are lovers of dairy, and I've said this to people, you need to cut out the milk, especially if they're having it with their coffee and tea or their cheese. And they're like, oh, I can't do that, or it becomes very difficult, or something like coffee, sugar, whatever it is, right? What is that turning point? Right? Because some people still don't want to cut out. They might cut down a little bit, but they're like, oh, it's always such a big thing. What is that belief system for you and the people you've interviewed that really should be that first change before you can even look at being motivated to change your food and diet?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think number one is just believing it's possible. You know what I mean? Because if you yeah, you have to believe it's possible before you can take the steps, to like be inspired, which is one of the reasons that I have captured so many stories, is because I want people to know and believe that it's possible to get better.
Mm.
And then I think it's hard for often, and I know it was for myself, to get started on those first steps, to be like, I don't want to give things up. I hear that a
Yeah.
lot. Like, I don't
Yes.
want to give things up. But like looking
Yes.
back in hindsight for myself, it's like, wow, I feel so much better that it's worth it. I mean, for sure, it was hard to change those habits. But once you change the habits,
And you notice the difference it
yeah,
makes.
yeah, you start to feel better and it keeps you going and inspires you to do even more, I think.
Yeah, and so what are people sort of being told? Like usually when they go to the doctors, the standard sort of general practitioner is saying, "Oh, your body's attacking itself with autoimmune," right? Do you agree with this narrative from what you've heard in stories? But autoimmune is the body attacking itself. I mean, that's a big thing that we used to hear, and maybe still heard by some doctors. What is your narrative on and your take on that?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it, it's sort of aggressive language, your
Mm,
body attacking yourself
it wants to
which,
heal really all the
yeah,
time.
exactly. Your body wants to heal. So really, I think it's more about recognizing that it's like the check engine light on. Autoimmunity is a sign that you need to look at look deeper and take some steps to nurture your health. I don't like the concept or the metaphor of the body attacking itself.
So, how do you explain, or how have people been explaining to the way they've processed when they have been diagnosed by their doctors that they've got an autoimmune condition now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's often what they hear is that the body is attacking itself. Whereas really, yeah, I mean, like I said, I like to look at it as a signal that things just aren't functioning properly and we need to bring them back into balance.
So from what you've heard, what have been some of the stories that you can share with clients and how they've used holistic healing, whether it's food, diet, lifestyle, and the biggest one being stress? Let's cover a bit about that and how manageable and how completely reversible is a lot of their diagnosis when the doctors think there's nothing that they can do, and they don't even mention, I mean, it's probably the same where you are, but I think in the Western medical model, there's just no looking a lot at the time about diet and lifestyle. They'll go straight to medication, pharmaceuticals, instead of even taking a few moments. I mean, unless you're going to a functional doctor, but a lot of the just general practitioners just know how to prescribe pharmaceuticals, unfortunately, and they don't really spend time to go through what people can do. But look, these days with, social media, AI, all of that, I mean, people are a lot more knowledgeable and equipped, and they're not just going to take the doctor's word for things now. They're a lot more research-minded, I think. So, yeah, what have you seen with some of the people you've interviewed, and how reversible were their diseases when they were sort of, not in a good place? And, how were they after months or like a year or two of working on their health?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. To your point, I think it's interesting because people, kind of going back to the nutrition part, even people with inflammatory bowel disease will be told what you eat has nothing to do with it. Whereas this is your digestive tract, and what you eat, it's entirely being, fed by, your digestive tract is being fed by that. So I think it's so interesting. And I think every story I've done, there's a diet component, no matter what, even if it's maybe more about mold illness or Lyme disease or something like that. I think every single person moved forward in some way with diet. And, what I've seen across all the stories that I've captured, there tend to be 4 or 5 themes. And in terms of steps that people took. And this is across all types of things, women's health challenges. I've done Parkinson's stories, Alzheimer's, all kinds of autoimmunity, just fibromyalgia. It feels like about the 5, they're like 5 things that people do over and over. So nutrition, we've talked a ton about. Gut health, we've also touched on. Even folks with Alzheimer's needed to do some gut healing. So I think it's not part of the conventional model to look at all these different aspects as potential root causes. Stress is another huge one that nearly everybody will say my illness came on, or my symptoms really came on after. And it's almost to the point where when I'm talking to someone, I'm listening for that point. And for me, it was having a baby, that just really set things ablaze. And I'm sure.
Yeah. Especially when you're a new mom, right? And you're like, you go from not having a child to not sleeping, feeding around the clock, right? Extremely tired. And it's full on for the first. And also if your hormones are out of whack, like just even with postnatal depression, perhaps all of that tiredness compounded with just being a new mom and all of that, it can really set your body awry for sure.
Yeah. So the stress, so the stressor can be a specific thing. It can be having a baby, a death in the family, a divorce, something like that. Or it can just be long-term chronic stress that just wears. Yeah, right. Where someone's always in survival mode. Detox or toxins are also a big theme that I hear where people really need to address that component, either detox from toxins and also reduce their toxin exposure in daily life. and mindset, really also a huge part of it.
And do you find that people that you spoke to had that positive, because obviously there are people that can look at the glass half full or half empty. Did you get an understanding of those? Or obviously all the people you spoke to probably had that turning point of feeling better, but was there a part of them that needed, especially if they have something like as bad as cancer, but was there a turning point where they switched the mindset, became more positive, or even just something that they were just feeling so bad that they needed to just switch it and become a lot more positive about how their body could heal, being motivated to do all the changes? Every little bit counts. Did you see that in the people that you interviewed?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What's interesting is I almost feel like it's like a moment of rebellion with a lot of people I speak with, where it's like, okay, that's it. I am fed up. They have an anecdote, like maybe, one woman, her daughter came to her, and her teenage daughter came to her and said, Mom, you have 5 autoimmune diseases. Are you going to make it? Are you going to live? Are you going to,
Wow.
we're worried we're going to lose you. And that was the point where she was like, okay, no, I'm fed up. I'm, doing whatever it takes to find an alternative to what I've been doing. So it's kind of that. It's like a moment of rebellion, or, yeah, inspiration. Like seeing it, like with me, I actually came across stories in private Facebook groups, where anecdotes buried in private Facebook groups where, people are getting better, no longer have the signs and symptoms of autoimmunity or whatever. So it can be that. It can be inspiration, or it can be like, I'm just fed up and I'm going to rebel and figure this
And I
out.
think it sort of hits a point where you're like, I don't want to live like this anymore, right? I'm in so much pain. Something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
then also if there's a purpose, if you've got grandchildren or you've got kids who are still young, whatever it is, right? It's got to be like something has to change. If you can't look after yourself, how can you be around to look after your loved ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
it's a big thing. So what does that rebuilding look like in terms of, let's talk about food. So we spoke about how food is information. Some of the things, like you said, dairy, gluten, what other things have you seen people do? And we can talk a bit more. I know sort of things that I've sort of get my clients to test for and look at. But what else have you seen them do in terms of changing that sort of diet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I definitely believe there's no one size fits all in terms
Correct.
of
Yeah.
diet. There are definitely things I hear over and over again. Dairy and gluten are huge. I think there's one person I've interviewed ever who fixed their autoimmunity and still ate gluten. And even she was like, I feel better when I'm not eating it. So with autoimmunity in particular, gluten seems to be a trigger. So yeah, so there's an interesting connection there. Sugar is another big one. And
Sugar
then, yeah,
feeds a lot of the bad bacteria that's happening in the gut.
exactly.
And a lot of people have way too much sugar, whether it's chocolates or the midnight sort of ice cream or dessert. It's such a Western thing to have dessert after a main meal. And it's like, you've got to have the main and you got to have some sort of dessert, right? Whether it's ice
always got to have the dessert. Yeah.
It's always a dessert. And it's like, why? I even speak to clients, why are you having that chocolate or ice cream at 9, 10 o'clock at night, like every night? You know? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
sugar.
Yeah, sugar's a tough one for sure. And then, yeah, just processed foods and inflammatory seed oils. And really, most of the people I've spoken with have found results with some form of paleo. Not that you have to completely eliminate carbs, but a paleo diet, most of them are getting rid of the inflammatory carbs.
There's one thing that I sort of get clients to do now. If they've got the digestive symptoms, we might run a gut test.
Mm-hmm.
So we will normally do a stool test to see what is coming back, and that will tell you the levels of, is there bacteria, is there parasites, what levels of the good bacteria like lactobacillus and a lot of the good gut markers, as opposed to what are the bad bacteria that you've got, and like how much that sort of is in your diet. Can also come back and show if people are sensitive to gluten, to dairy, not processing starches very, very well. So yes, and then looking at then, okay, what do we do? Because from my research and what's happening is your whole gut microbiome takes about 1 year to completely change. You may start seeing the symptoms start clearing up within a couple of days, like an elimination diet, like test out and go dairy. If you wanted to do specific food intolerance testing, that is always helpful. So I'll always include a bit of that as well, because people have no idea. It could come out that you're actually having an IgGA response to even avocado or limes or carrots, or
Right.
I think will come back with chicken. And you think that's all fine. But for them, they actually have a reaction that they're having an inflammatory response to. So when you actually cut the right foods for the individual, like we said, then they start feeling better. And then working on the microbiome, because it's so complex. There's lots of bacteria. It's so much work that it takes time, especially if you've been eating the same thing, having the same poor diet or not the right diet for you for a long time, an inflammatory diet, because things like what you're eating, which you think could be good for you, but it's actually causing your own inflammatory response. And then working on good probiotics, gut healing foods and diet. And then over time, within 6 to 12 months, you could literally reverse for sure autoimmune, because you've fixed the gut, which we know that 80 to 90% of your immune system is in your gut.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a powerful influencer there. Yeah. And I had like five things going on in my gut. I had SIBO,
Wow.
H. pylori, Candida
Yes.
overgrowth,
Yeah.
parasites, low
Yes.
digestive enzymes. I had like all of it. So it makes complete
Yes.
sense to say, like, yeah, you work through those things and rebuild and balance,
Correct.
the good bacteria and the bad. And it takes time.
It
Absolutely.
does, yeah. It's not overnight, but that's what I said. It's a good 6 to 12 months, but by every week you should start feeling like you notice. You do something, you get better, right? You do a food elimination diet for around 3 to 6 months. Then as you're fixing the gut, normally what I do is start reintroducing those foods one by one. Because once you build the gut up, you can then be tolerant to a lot of foods, obviously, unless you're celiac and that. But if you have just an inflammatory response to it, because your gut is so inflamed, right? And it doesn't have enough good bacteria. Once you've got your gut working like a well-oiled machine, then technically you should be able to eat a lot of those foods back again. It's not processed foods and sugar, but even certain things which we deem healthy that your body is now having a response to, like, protein or something like that, or some type of vegetable, fruit even. Once you've cleared up the gut and sort of healed that, then you should be able to eat well again.
Yeah.
And yes, I think a lot of the time, all that sugar, the processed stuff, and it's seen so much. Like you go to the supermarket and most people are eating processed food, right? Fast food, processed food, the salt, the sugar, and the bad oils. Let's talk about the oxidative stress and the oils, the cooking oils that people don't realize can cause a lot of inflammation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I visited family recently and they were using soybean oil spray, which I thought, your opinion, right? It's inflammatory.
A lot of it is like GMO, plus like even vegetable oil. I find the worst is vegetable oil.
Canola here.
Right. Canola oil, vegetable oil, like vegetable oil, there is no vegetables in vegetable oil. I think a lot of vegetarian or people that think it's healthy have no idea that vegetable oil is not made from vegetables. I think it's just, it's so inflammatory a lot of time, and there's no vegetables in there. I don't know why they name it vegetable oil, to be honest.
They shouldn't be allowed to name it that.
No, it shouldn't be allowed to name, But even just cooking with the wrong oils, with the wrong cooking pans, like toxins. I'm always telling clients about toxins. They don't realize just the cookware, the food, the water that you drink with is actually very toxic as well.
Yeah. We've paid a lot of attention to our water at my house just because I know how important it is. So
there is a saying. There was a Nobel Prize winner. I always forget his name. It's such a long name, but he was basically saying, even in the 1960s, there's a Nobel Prize winner, and he said that disease cannot grow in an alkaline body. Right? Autoimmune, cancer. A lot of the time, the foods that we're having, sugar, processed foods, stress, it causes your body to be acidic. Okay. So if your body has a very low pH, which is a high acidity, that's when disease and your gut microbiome, all of that. Whereas if you have a alkaline body, which is what we mentioned sort of about alkaline, sort of eating more vegetables and fruit, disease cannot grow, especially cancer, cannot grow in an alkaline body.
Wow. Yeah. That's fascinating to know.
Interesting,
really.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
important.
But
And
most people are highly acidic, right? The stress will actually, even if you're eating well, I think going back to your point on stress, even if you're eating well, but you're highly stressed, that
mhm,
doesn't matter.
yeah. Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, I definitely see that in myself, and that is
Mhm.
my point of regression, really, for me, because I've done so much work on my health over the years that when I
Yeah.
see my like sliding back and kind of losing some ground on my health again, it's usually because of stress. And so, yeah, it's something I've become hyper aware of and have to actively work to manage and have
Mhm.
tactics for every single day.
Yeah, most people just sort of go about their day to day thinking just, they think, oh, manage your stress, or they themselves believe they're managing it. But that's when, a lot of these things happen. Like when they go through periods of stress, your body cannot cope with being in that high stress situation for long periods of time. What sort
Yeah.
of stories, like you said, you saw things from sort of major stressful situations? What sort of other stories have you heard from those who had the stress, and how did they go and manage it from that sort of
Mhm.
meditation, or what did they do to really realize, okay, I've got to change this stress around?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, for nearly everyone I speak with recognizes at some point that stress is a factor. Maybe they will do all this protocol stuff.
Hmm.
Work on their gut, change their diet, and do all this, and they've gotten kind of better, but they're not. They're plateauing. They're not getting all the way there until they're like, oh, I need to find a new job because the job I have is just way too stressful. I can't heal if I still have this job or if I'm still in this relationship or,
Yeah.
whatever sort of stressor is resolved. They find that then once they kind of remove that block from their lives, then they're able to more fully heal. So there's like the big things like that. And then there's just, the daily stress that we all need to figure out how to manage. Personally, like I have to work less than I did.
Mm.
I work
Mhm.
fewer hours than I used to, and that's a trade off that I found that I need to make. But it's important because with the time I'm not working, I'm doing things that are supporting my body. Like I'm going on walks. I do sauna. I have a little home
Mhm.
sauna, and I do
Mhm.
that. Or I journal, or I meditate, or it does take some time, but it's super important. And those are the types of practices, like nervous system regulation
Yeah.
practices, that I hear so often from folks as well.
But then a lot of people are doing that after they get sick. A lot of people should be incorporating, right? I think our message should be to start incorporating these things every day, every week, right? Looking at until we don't want to wait till it's already way too late or the stress has already reached breaking point, right? I think, like you said, some people stay in a job way too long and it is causing them undue stress. And for what, right? Where it starts affecting their health. So managing that or looking for something, a change in, relationship or work, because it's not worth your health in the end, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, and there's this quote or saying that if you don't slow down, your body is going to slow you down
Yeah.
for you. Like if you're just, pushing, pushing, pushing,
Yes.
for years and years, then it's like your body is just going to kind of go on strike at some point. And that's what
That's right.
I've
Yeah.
heard. One woman who has Graves' disease I spoke with, yeah, she just, it was like everything was fine. And then one morning she woke up and couldn't see. It was just like her
Oh,
body was
wow.
just like, no. Like,
Yeah.
this is your wake up call. And so, it's not always so dramatic like that, but for some people it is. It's like we have to put the brakes on.
Yeah, and putting them on earlier instead of like going through the red light and thinking, "Oh, take the risk." It will catch up because people forget that our bodies are not a machine,
Mhm.
right? It's not meant to continuously. I mean, look, these days, who knows, with sort of 3D printing and you can change organs, but we're still far away from that. But there's a lot that we can do day to day, morning practice, that sort of thing, for sure. I want to touch on, you mentioned on the mold and on, mold is a big one. And for those who don't realize, I had a client I've been working with, but she came to me sort of end of last year. And she had gone to see about 6 specialists, everyone under the sun. She'd gone to, and she wasn't living in a major city. She was living in like a rural town, so she had to fly spend a lot of money to fly to a capital city close by to her to get tested by these so-called top specialists. And she had really bad tiredness, fatigue, could not get out of bed. It was like the fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And based on where she lives, the first thing I said is, have you looked at mold? Not a single doctor, specialist, people she'd seen had mentioned mold.
Yeah.
And I said, has anywhere been flooded? What's your work environment like? And she goes, yeah, it was flooded a couple of years ago. The lady who was in her place in that office several years before had left the year before because she felt so bad. And by the time she left, she started feeling a lot better. So I said, can you go and get someone to check if there is mold? And literally, she got a mold specialist to come in, and the whole office, I kid you not, she sent me photos, was riddled with black mold.
Wow.
Riddled with it.
Wow.
And I was like, you cannot be here any longer. You literally close the door and let them fix it up. She was working for a government, actually. And she had been feeling bad and getting worse, like when she probably started in its office. And within not even 18 months, probably started getting really bad within just little symptoms. And then she hit breaking point at literally 18 months. Half the time she couldn't go into the office. She was so tired. A lot of people don't realize the extent of mold. Even I had a client who moved into a house. Luckily, she beat the cancer, but she moved into an apartment right in the lowest floor. It never got any sunlight. And it was just this dark, because I think it depends on where the sun's coming from, but no sun, not much window light at all. And it was just smelt like mold, but obviously, cheap rent and that. And within a year, she was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, she beat it, but she had to move out. And it was like, I think they realized later that there was a lot of mold in the place.
Yeah.
And it is one of the biggest problems that if you've got, things that you can't test in a blood test, because you can't see these a lot in the blood test, right? You got to check and then do like a mold tox, like you got to do like a specific test for mold toxicity that doesn't show up in a lot of normal blood work and all the symptoms. And then some doctors even told her, like I'm sure you've heard from your clients, oh, it's in your head. How many clients have they heard from the doctors where they said, oh, your symptoms are in your head? Like, is that the thing that aggravates, like, you're thinking I'm making up my symptoms? And the number of doctors that they go, oh, yeah, it could be just menopause. It's probably in your head.
Right.
Yeah.
So dismissive. Yeah. And incredibly frustrating to hear that. And I will say that mold is one that I hear over and over as the cause that is finally found. Like,
the missing piece of the puzzle.
Years. Yeah. And often a lot of them are thyroid stories where Hashimoto's in particular. I'm sure you see a tie there where they, kind of finally figured out that their Hashimoto's was like re-triggered by a moldy environment. I have a friend here in town. I think she's moved 5 or 6 times because it's been tough to find a place, a clean, safe place, but so critical because she has a Hashimoto's history. I had a mold story as well. It was kind of interesting. I really healed my autoimmunity where I didn't have autoimmune markers anymore and was feeling good. But then I started having new symptoms again, like fatigue and a lot of eye irritation, once again, different eye irritation, and realized that, we had to address some mold in our house. So,
it was the same with my son. So we'd had a lot of rain in his room, and we're in a brand new house, but there was a big bunch of rain, and basically there was a big pool in the ceiling, so you could see the sort of ceiling cave in where all the water must have been pooling.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, he started getting really itchy skin, a little bit of even labored breathing. It was only young, right? It was only probably 7 years old. And it didn't come on straight away, but I'm noticing his skin was getting not great. And then we could start seeing a bit of the mold there. We thought, it's going to be fine. But no, in the end, it got bit too worse, and we had someone go up and check. They're like, we have to clean this out. So and it wasn't even riddled, it was just this one section, but obviously mold would replicate, and then we had to just get the whole area cleaned out, and then his skin started improving, his breathing was better.
Okay.
But just even people don't realize that it is actually it's slow, but over time it can once you've got the symptoms, it can be quite debilitating. And yeah, it is. I find the missing piece that a lot of people don't realize, because you have to get someone out to check. And sometimes you can't see it, right? It's not something that you can see, right? You need a special light. And it's a big thing. I'm saying, if people have not found the answer, check if you're in a place that doesn't get much sunlight, or there's been a lot of rain. And then over time, months later, you're starting to get certain tiredness symptoms. For sure.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things is fatigue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's a big one. Any other environmental toxins that you can that your clients have sort of come across? Like I said, we've sort of covered a lot of I think the cooking pans are a big one. Again, sort of mold toxins, and just even plastic water bottles, and just things that people are using, microwaves, that sort of thing, it compounds over time, the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, right. I mean, the toxin element is huge. I mean, you can't discount that in any way. I mean, personally, I had a toxin panel done at one point, and it was just crazy. And I had already been eating organic food and drinking, I thought pretty clean water for a long time, but we are exposed to, the air and, car exhaust and airplane, whatever, and all the things in the air, and personal care products, laundry, detergents. That's my
cooking, cleaning, all of that, everything, dish liquid, everything we're using daily that we may not be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, just kind of slowly over time, like really paying attention to that adds up and makes a difference. And that, I mean, you can't entirely avoid all the toxins in life, but I started doing sauna. I try to do it, a couple times a week, and that I find I feel better, and at least like psychologically, I'm at least like
well, you're detoxing, like you're releasing through the pores in your skin, which is the biggest organ.
Yeah. So having some detox practices, along with also paying super close attention to the things you're putting in your body.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, what are some of the things, like mistakes, not really mistakes, but things that people may be trying to do as they're healing naturally, and if they're doing things on their own? Are there sort of any misconceptions or any sort of things that people start off with at the beginning that could be common things that people are trying to do as they're healing naturally?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
Or people that they've done?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this thought that, like, if you're healing naturally, you don't necessarily get a bunch of lab testing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think personally, I found that super helpful. And I know it sounds like you do a lot of testing as well. And the folks I've spoken with, you kind of have to know what you're dealing with before you can move forward. I needed to know what my gut looked like. I needed to know that I had adrenal fatigue as well. That was another one. Some, cortisol issues, and, the toxin issues. You need to know what you're facing so that you can come up with a plan and move forward.
And I think if you don't, definitely to see a doctor who is a functional medicine doctor, for sure. You can look them up, I think, in local areas, who really look at all the functional testing and look at different ways to really address diet, lifestyle, nutrition, put you on a plan, as opposed to a lot of the conventional doctors, or even seeing a really good naturopath, holistic healing doctor, or someone that can really look at that. If you're looking at natural ways of healing, then to go down that path and work with good practitioners in that sense. Who can give you a plan and do the right testing for you.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. And yes, important to find a smart practitioner to work with.
So I guess just wrapping up, tell us a bit about your bit more about your book, where they can find it, and if you wanted to share like one memorable story, I guess from a client that you spoke to. Like, there's probably a lot, but what are sort of what stands out for you? What's one amazing sort of inspirational story that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the book is on autoimmunity, and I captured a bunch of autoimmune reversals, basically people who, like me, went down on the autoimmune spectrum or no longer have the signs and symptoms of autoimmunity. And I think the stories that stand out to me are the ones where someone had 5 or 6 autoimmune disorders. They talk about it as, I was collecting autoimmune diagnoses, just, kind of like each time they would go to the doctor, they would get a new one. And it's so, I think it can feel so defeating, but ultimately the things that they were doing to support their body kind of helped them get rid of all of them. So
Yeah.
the woman I mentioned earlier who her daughter came to her and said, Mom, I'm worried you're not going to make it. You're not going to be here for us.
Mhm.
I think she had quit her job. She was kind of just in bed at that point with rheumatoid arthritis and celiac and 3 other autoimmune diagnoses. She had 5 at that point. And really for her, yeah, it was these foundational things that we are talking about. Gut healing was huge, an anti-inflammatory diet, a low toxin lifestyle or detoxing. And just nurturing her body with proper sleep.
Yeah.
And
Stress minimization.
yeah, minimizing stress and focusing on, just self-care practices. And of course, it takes time, but ultimately, like she's thriving today and she became a
Mhm.
practitioner. She was
Wow.
she became a functional medicine practitioner because she's
Oh,
like,
amazing.
this stuff works. Yeah. So, Julie, she is thriving today. And
So I guess diagnosis can be a gift sometimes, right? I mean, there's also an answer. Look, we don't like to have labels, but it's like, okay, now I know what's going on. How can I now fix this?
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis
No,
to
no,
start
not
going,
a
but
like not a name per se, but at least go,
yeah.
look, there's something wrong, right? There's
Oh,
something seriously that needs addressing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because then it is a wake-up call and it like you said, I think is a gift. I mean, a lot of us who have had a chronic illness or a, challenging health issue kind of look back on it as um, a positive thing. I mean, certainly this has, spun me into an entirely different world of trying to capture these stories and bring them to people to inspire hope. So it has been a gift. And it's also a gift because now I feel like I have the knowledge and the tools of my own body and health to help me live longer than I would have otherwise, and hopefully with more quality of life as well.
And that's the thing. It's not always lifespan, right? It's health span, like I
Yeah.
always mention. And at the end of the day, we want to be living really healthy to the day we die. We don't want to be sick and riddled with all of these and not living quality of life, right? And sometimes it can be decades for people. They can't even walk up. Like I've got a client who's in her 70s. She can barely walk up the stairs, right? She was in like diapers from already, almost 10 years. And just really struggling, right? And she's not that old. And that's not quality of life, right? A lot of the time, we want to be able to do all the things and be active. Whereas my mom, she's 75 and she is like, she's more active than a lot of 21-year-olds. I'm telling you, she doesn't stop. And
Wow.
yeah, a lot of energy, really vibrant health, all of that. So, but she sleeps really well and she eats really well. Like she's an amazing cook.
Yeah.
And as soon as her head hits a pillow, 8 hours straight of good sleep. Like she doesn't wake up at all, right? And so it's really important. Even her whole family, like my grandparents and even my mom's got 4 siblings, they can all sleep. They could sleep standing up
That is a
even. Like
gift. That is,
pillow, dad will be talking to her for a minute. Not even before the end of the minute, she's snoring away.
that is like a talent. Yes.
Yeah, it's I've got my dad's genes, unfortunately, but yeah, not as great sleeper as her. But yeah, she's really good health. So yeah,
Oh,
she's going to be
nice.
living a long and healthy life for sure.
That's
So I guess
fantastic.
lastly, what does rebuilding your health truly mean?
Yeah, I love this question. And I mean, it goes back to the concept, I think, for me, it's a kind of a mental picture because there's not one pill or not one protocol or tactic. It's really about the little steps that are building blocks that just add up. And looking back on it, yeah, I just did one thing and then I did another thing and another thing. And each thing adds up to kind of fill the bank of health for me. And so I mean, I think that's probably what I would pass on to someone else is just start with one step and try not to think of it as overwhelming, and that one step is going to nurture you and inspire you to then take another step.
And I think for everyone listening, it's the awareness. It's like, look at what is in front of you. Look at what you're eating and ask yourself, is this going to be better for my health or worse? Right? And just everything around, like what you're using day to day, like just the awareness, I think, is important. Most people aren't even aware of a lot of this stuff. And just starting to do your research, start being aware, because, we can always, our body wants to heal and it's always doing its best to heal. But as obviously chronic illness, it's just built up. And then reversing it just takes a lot longer. So if we can stop it getting too bad and start working on all these little things now, we can definitely live a really long and healthy life for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Casey. It's been lovely chatting with you. We're going to post the link in the notes so that, if you want a copy of Casey's book, it'd be great to have a read and hear about all these amazing stories, and very inspirational for sure.
Great. Thank you, Ellie. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks, Casey. We'll talk to you next time. Hello, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. If there's one message from today's conversation, it's that autoimmune conditions are often a signal from the body asking for deeper support and healing. Where we begin to address the root causes through nourishment, gut health, nervous system balance, and integrative care, the body has an incredible capacity to restore balance. And this is especially important when it comes to fertility, because immune health, inflammation, and hormonal balance all play a powerful role in creating the optimum environment for conception and healthy pregnancy. So if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so that we can continue with these empowering conversations to more people. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next episode.